as we've now reached 357,000 subscribers on the channel, it's time for a 357 only hunt in the Hunter Classic. Now, we had options. We could have done this in Call of the Wild as well, but I think Classic gives us more that we can do. So there are two different variations, the First Lady and the Standard Edition, and you can see I've got the worst scope on the Standard one. I will try to swap back and forth with the scopes so that we don't have to use that, but sometimes that's just going to be a thing, I think. I have a lot planned for this, including having feral goat feeders filled here on Bushrangers, a kind of regular hunt on Loggers Point, and some goose hunting at the very end over on Hirschfeld. And fittingly enough, there is a feral goat just kind of walking right at us right behind our tent, so we'll try to start with that. And I really was a little bit unsure about choosing Classic over Call of the Wild for this. I just like the variety and the fact that there are two different 357 variations, but I'd like to think the fact that this feral goat is literally walking right to us where we started the hunt is a sign that we made the right choice. So let's go ahead, pop that guy with the 357. I would like to think these are going to be some of the easier species to take. One of my goals here is to try to have a good variety of species sizes that we can take with this gun. So from Canada geese all the way up to mule deer, maybe russet deer. They're actually the biggest in terms of max weight species that we could take with it. We may run to Pickameat Bay and try to get one of those as well. It just depends on how the rest of the hunt goes. But for our first kill, a slightly below average feral goat, I would say. Left lung and stomach shot at 40 meters, 168 score. And we will then head to the first of two feeders that are filled, which may or may not produce anything. I find my goat feeders are very hit or miss. Hopefully today will be a hit. And, as kinda initially feared, there is exactly one goat at the feeder, and it's not really that impressive, but I kinda think this works out better. We've got an axis deer buck coming in, and I wanted to get an axis deer during this hunt, so even though he's not huge, he's at least decent, and I think that'll be a good solution, so hopefully that's gonna actually bring him down. We may, just for the sake of it, hit him one more time to make sure. Went with the First Lady again because I forgot to switch scopes, but that'll work. We've got one more goat feeder to visit anyway, and we already got a feral goat just because one walked right to us anyway, and that was a long shot, so the follow-up really wasn't necessary. Regardless, adds an extra species to the list that we'll get today. Fairly decent weight one at 104, 138 score, and we will head down to the next feeder, which really isn't all that far away. The unexpected opportunities here are continuing. Got an actually pretty decent male kangaroo, and again we're going to end up with the First Lady revolver because I've not swapped the scopes, but we can potentially get a lung shot in there. There was no shot that I figured we'd get a kangaroo today, and now we've got one. And actually on our way over, I'll swap scopes so we can actually use both variations today. But already, we've kind of accomplished far more than I thought we'd do here on Bushrangers. Hard shot that guy at 56 meters. Not a big one at 70 score, but a nice little bonus kill. Well, sad to say, the goat feeder idea absolutely flopped. There is nothing around this one either, so if not for that one that walked right to us at the start of the hunt, we'd have gotten 0 from a hunt where we specifically went to 2 full feeders. But we actually had pretty decent success, got the one feral goat, the axis deer, and the kangaroo. So I think we'll go ahead and swap to loggers and do a little bit of deer and maybe coyote hunting. I had just about forgotten that Bobcat would be an option here too, and fortunately, I did grab the collar because that's a max weight, max score estimate Bobcat, and I think at least we should be in range to try to call it in. We'll make sure. That's kind of pushing it, so we should be able to walk maybe 40 meters, 50 meters. I didn't even realize there's a pretty solid buck standing down there too. Not only that, there's also a doe right in front of us, so we gotta be pretty careful here. I went ahead and put out the collar. I did hear the ambient sound that bobcats make, so we're in range to call it in. Hopefully it's just gonna turn around and come our way. But I did do a fairly poor job of explaining. The only weapons we're carrying are 357s today. I imagine that was probably fairly obvious, but we can't just grab a bow and get that doe out of the way, for instance. We have to try to make do here without. And as long as it keeps walking away from us, we should be okay, and just hopefully that cat starts moving this way. So we kinda had to redo our setup, and we've got, I believe, that same buck running around beside us, alert from the Bobcat, so gotta make sure we get him down. But there is potential, at least, for that to be a pretty good size one, and I think we'll attempt to track down that whitetail buck. It's at best like a low 160s, but that's not a bad deer, especially considering we are hunting with nothing but 357s, which are a little underpowered for whitetail in the game. As for this guy, a weight of 24 kilos, 9.3, that is our biggest Bobcat ever. With a 357 on a 357 only hunt. Who would have thought? I'm really glad we were able to get that set up, because he didn't come into the call initially. We had to move the caller, get a little bit closer, and fortunately he came in. Not bad, that's a really good one. And as per usual with Bobcats, there's really not a good way to get a decent trophy shot, and what we end up with is, I think, some version of Grumpy Bobcat, so imagine that, but our biggest ever, and it was sitting close to a decent whitetail buck, so one of these tracks here is probably going to be it. As I said, it was running around right beside us, alert because of the Bobcat, so ideally we can get right on those tracks and figure it out. This might genuinely be the most successful, like, kill two animals type of thing we've ever had. It's been a couple of minutes since we took the trophy shot of the Bobcat, and our buck running, came right in, no big deal. So where this leaves us is in a position where we either could stay here on loggers and try to go and get a mule deer, because that was sort of why I wanted to come to Loggers Point. That's the biggest deer species other than roosa deer that we could take with the 357. Or we can go to Picayune Bay, get a roosa deer, and then go and goose hunt. And I think, even though we've only got 2 kills on loggers, which is kind of underwhelming, they were both good ones, a 159 whitetail, and then a monster Bobcat at 9.3, so I think I'd rather go and take literally the biggest possible animal with the 357 that's allowed, and then go and wrap up with some goose hunting. So we'll jump to Picayune Bay, and hopefully the roosa deer will cooperate and it won't take long. And I suppose this is one way to encounter a roosa deer. It's been almost 30 minutes. There have been countless roosa deer females, and finally we have a male, and he had already spooked. He actually, I think, sees us there, so I'm hoping he's going to calm down and we can bring him in. I don't know what to expect from the 357 on a roosa deer, and I'd like to get it close enough to maybe even go for a heart shot. So I don't know if he just turned around on his own, or maybe if he is calmed down and coming into this call, but we're probably going to bring him to 20 meters, 30 meters, somewhere in there, just to try to ensure we can get him down. But it is looking like he's on his way into this call, and he is about at 30 now, so I would prefer if he would sort of face right at us, just to make the heart shot a little more achievable, but I think we'll go with that, and hope that's going to bring him down. I would love to hit him again if we could. I don't think we did. I can't imagine a really more ideal situation for the lungs other than maybe being a little more broadside. So hopefully, at least, that's going to be a fatal hit. The blood, though, is lung blood. It looked like body blood, but that's going to get him. So that's good news. Honestly, I'm fairly impressed with the 357. Axis deer and roosa deer, some of the bigger species that it can take. It's managed lung shots in maybe less than ideal circumstances, at least. And so, we've now brought down the biggest species we can with the gun, and I think it's time, actually a pretty hefty one. They max at 160, so being above 150 kilo really does... Now that doesn't make sense. Head and left lung? Their hitboxes have always been weird, so I'm gonna assume it's something to do with that, but anyway, a pretty good sized specimen as far as just how big roosa deer can be and how big of a species we can take with the 357. And on that note, we'll go and do something a little more challenging in trying to get some geese out of the air. Well, the good news is, our first flock of geese broke. We've got a bigger flock out there, but frankly, I'm actually not sure we can get 3, so we'll just go ahead and focus on these. There was a time in the Hunter Classic where if you wanted to shoot like a bird species, from a distance, the 357 was actually the way to go. There was no 22. There's one. I've saved the other 357 with the scope for longer shots. That's 2. Can we get that one? Maybe we could have gotten more than 3. Not by like a lot, but maybe 4 or 5 if we were able to shoot that well. I'm fairly pleased with that, but we do have our retrievers, so we can just kind of sit here and reload, but that went well. We've done this one other time. I don't know why either. We actually ended up shooting a rare goose, but it's surprisingly not that bad considering, you know, a handgun for geese isn't really the ideal weapon. And so Rocky's returning with our 3rd goose. We'll go ahead and claim these, and I think we'll try to get one more flock. Now, I have no idea if any of these were decent. 5,800 nearly for that one. These look to be the same size, so I can't imagine there's a huge score difference there. A little bit lower for this one at about 4,700. And then the last one that we took with the scope looks maybe a touch bigger. It is the biggest of the 3 at 5,882. So not bad. Hopefully the next flock will maybe have more than 3, so we have the potential to get more if we can shoot that well again. But I suppose that'll be up to the geese. Well, that just about figures. The first flock to actually fly over us is barely a flock, it's a pair. There's another flock coming over there, so we'll ignore these regardless. But every flock of geese so far has been way to the side, but I think we can probably make do here. That's what we're looking to see, so it looks like there are 6. I think that's actually the max possible break. So we'll bring them around. We will kind of go with the same strategy. That one, like, second from the right looks big. So we'll try to get that first with the open sights. Little behind it there. Estimate-wise, it apparently is not that big. I guess we're just really lucky on our first attempt. And not as good this time, but sort of made up for it a bit. I think we'll just go for one in there. Are we actually going to end up with less in the second flock? I think we are. That is a little unfortunate. Pretty sure we only killed the 2. Maybe it would have been better if we didn't specifically target one goose, but just when I thought maybe the 357 was a better option than the 22, I kind of think we better stick with the 22 for most goose hunts. But this one is going to be a 5.6 kilo goose, which maybe was the one that we shot first. I don't even know where the other is, but fortunately, we have a dog that'll be able to figure that out. And in the end there on the second flock, the scope didn't help us one bit. 5.3 kilos, so no big geese unfortunately, but can't complain when we had a monster bobcat, a pretty good sized whitetail buck, and I'm honestly just really thrilled with how this hunt went. We had a huge variety of species. Obviously getting a personal best bobcat is fantastic, and actually, we may go back to the trophy lodge for that. I hadn't intended to, but we might as well. We have a fast travel available. And so what I ended up doing was taking down a 15.9 scoring puma from here. And I like that this particular pose kind of continues the grumpy look for the bobcat, but we got that puma basically by fast traveling through one of the tunnels on Timber Grove trails up there in the mountains. And it was like 15 meters away. So I feel like the bobcat we actually earned a bit more. And considering, that when they changed the way that the scores work and now there's 4 decimal points, it's now possible to get a 16 plus puma. 15.9 when we got it was like the biggest barrier you could get, but now it's not quite as impressive. And also bobcats have been out for quite some time. For that to be our first ever over 9.3, I think that's maybe a better trophy anyway. But what a hunt. 357s only. It seems like every single time, whether it's in Call of the Wild, Way of the Hunter, or the Hunter Classic, when we do a weapon-specific hunt, we always end up finding something cool, and that bobcat just continues that trend a little bit further. But on that note, that is going to do it for this video, so thank you guys for watching. Thank you for 357,000 subscribers, and I'll see you next time.